All right, we get to this point in the summer, Stu, and we always hear about players filing for arbitration. Well, teams can file for arbitration as well, and that is the case today with this man right here. Minnesota Wild have filed arbitration for Kevin Fiala. You can see his numbers the last 2 seasons, and this is a guy who can put up some points when he's given the correct amount of playing time and stuff. So, well, first question for you, how is a team filing for arbitration different than what we hear conventionally of players filing for arbitration?
Player files for arbitration, the arbitrator will come back with an award. I believe the club has the ability to elect term in that scenario. That flips if it's the other way around. Club elected salary arbitration as to a specific player. Player gets to determine term after that point. It can take a 1 or a 2, never anything beyond that. A player can opt for a 1 or 2 year agreement coming out of salary arbitration.
Okay, Kevin Fiala goes into this arbitration. A lot of times it doesn't even get to arbitration. It gets settled ahead of time. Yeah. What do you think he's looking at? Fair market value for a guy like Kevin Fiala. What does he want?
Kevin Fiala comes off a pretty solid platform here. Remember, this is a pandemic-shortened schedule. Still puts up 20 goals, 20 assists for 40 points in just 50 games. Go back a year in time before that, it's 54 points over just 64 games. Again, another season that was affected by the pandemic during that period of time, JMO. So a good comparable for a guy like Fiala is Nikolai Ehlers going up to Winnipeg. So it would be, I mean, he's getting a pretty hefty raise over and above what we saw him get paid last year. It'll be interesting to see ultimately what the Ehlers, if Ehlers informs the award where Fiala is concerned. But I would suspect something in a range of 4 to 5-ish for somebody like Fiala, all things taken into account.
All right, nice pay rise for him, who made $3 million a year ago. Travis Sanheim, another guy who is team has filed for arbitration, so the Philadelphia Flyers right there. As far as the RFAs who have filed for arbitration, the deadline was over the weekend. Here are some of the notable names to file. You've got UC Saros of the Nashville Predators, $1.5 million cap hit last year. Neil Pionk, Jacob Vrana, he's the most expensive of the notable names here. Adam Pelech, a big piece to the back end for the Islanders. Vince Dunn and Ross Colton. Let's start with the goalie on the left there, UC Saros. He files for arbitration $1.5 million based on his workload, his commitment to the team, his responsibility for that team. One would think that he's going to get a significant pay raise. What do you think?
Yeah, I think so. The only complicating factor, I think, is look at the window within which we're evaluating UC Saros and his entitlement to a really hefty arbitration award. Again, it's a shrunk schedule. I think the arbitrator puts a little bit of emphasis on the fact that here's a player, he's not doing it over an entire 82 games. And there was this kind of, two halves to one particular season. Remember, the Preds really struggling, and goaltending was a factor in all that out of the gate, but it was largely UC Saros getting things turned around for these Nashville Predators. And if you invite the fact that Jordan Binnington might be a comp for a guy like UC Saros, I think all things being considered, entitlement to a pretty significant raise over his 1.5. Does he get all the way to a Jordan Binnington? Well, he didn't really have that kind of a year, didn't have that kind of a platform year. I don't know that gets him to 6. Binnington was a pretty remarkable circumstance, but I would suspect a pretty hefty raise for a guy like Saros at the end of the day. When the dust settles on that one, JMO.
UC Saros, .941 save percentage over his last 26 games. We'll see how that situation plays out. How about a guy like Neil Pionk? Are there any comparables to him, and what do you think arbitration does for his pay raise?
Yeah, Pionk comes in at a pretty hefty number, 3.0, I believe, is what we flashed on the board earlier, and had a really strong season. His worth to this Jets camp or Jets roster at the end of the day is significant. A guy that can play in a variety of circumstances. You'll see it largely runs through him on the back end with respect to the power play. So a guy that gets a lot of touches, gets a lot of feels, and I think it's fair to put him in some pretty lofty company like you're seeing on this particular graphic here. This is a guy that has long been renowned as a solid puck-moving defenseman and has inserted himself into some pretty significant comparables at the end of the day. Pionk, I think a bump coming for him, significant bump coming for him at the end of the day once we get the arbitration award, if we get that deep.
We talked about the importance of UC Saros to his team in Nashville. Maybe nobody as important to their squad as a healthy Adam Pelech. And we realized that in his absence from the Islanders' back end. So this guy goes to arbitration. What do you think he deserves?
Oh, difficult to put a specific number on it. Pelech's, Pelech's worth really in large part comes down to, comparables or stats driven by defensemen that are skilled at the defensive side of the game.
Are there comps to a guy like Adam Pelech, though, based on what he does for his team in that system?
There are a whole lot of intangibles it's really hard to pay a player for, and arbitrators are reluctant to pay a player for. But time on ice, in my estimation, and an arbitrator will put some stock in this, time on ice really for a guy like Pelech helped to establish their true value or speak to their true value to their specific team. And you can see how Pelech performed here in his platform year, regular season 2021, and look at the step up postseason, again, on a club that went for a rather deep run, the New York Islanders. Pelech's an important part of that.
All right, Jacob Vrana, as we showed you at the top, he was the highest paid player among our notable RFAs filing for player arbitration. What do you think? Comparable for him, and what do you think happens arbitration-wise for a guy like Jacob Vrana?
Jacob Vrana gets a good, honest look, without question. This is a guy that had a credible 2021 season. A pretty impressive body of work. A guy that Detroit puts a whole lot of stock in, without question, and a difficult guy to establish value for. You can see the platform year that a Vrana had in just 39 games, split between the Caps and the Wings. Rattles off 36 points in total, 19 of those being goals scored, and a guy I think is probably, we're going to find in a range of 3 and above. I would say that's probably pretty conservative. You've got to spend in a range of, even in dealing with the Group 2 category, the restricted free agent category, you're probably going to have to pay in a range of 4 and above for a 20-goal scorer. Vrana's proven himself to be that.
I know earlier in the show we talked about your involvement as in-house counsel for the NHLPA following your playing career. Were you involved in any of these arbitration situations? And if so, what is the process like this?
In the background, where player salary arbitration was concerned, wasn't my area specifically, but did assist in that area overall. It's really complicated. It's incredibly precise.
Does it get ugly?
It can be. It really can be. The process before you even get to a hearing is very involved. Players are often on their back foot. You don't anticipate this, but clubs will take a position at the expense of, a player's feelings are really at the expense almost of good player-club relations. You've got to make a case in arbitration, and that's not saying when you're the club, saying a lot of glowing things about a player.
Right, they want to knock your price tag down.
Some pretty tough stuff comes up. So for any player that's never been through it, brace yourself for that. If you've got great representation, you'll have a good expectation for what's coming before you get into that room.
How about a guy like Vince Dunn? He files for arbitration. This is a guy, a highly mobile defenseman. They're coveted these days. What do you think for a guy like Vince Dunn?
Yeah, I think Vince Dunn is going to see a nice bump himself. I think a guy that really has initially inserted himself into a pretty stout St. Louis Blues D-corps, but another guy that's, very skilled at playing in a variety of situations and has proven a real asset on the power play. Great release, quick release, and one that's very effective at kind of getting through, not necessarily scoring from the point, but getting through traffic and creating offense almost in an indirect way.
All right, so we had 17 players filing for arbitration. We had those 2 names with the teams filing for arbitration. So by my count, 19 right now. How many do you think actually get to arbitration? Usually they settle ahead of time, right?
Yeah, I mean, at a field of 19, assuming that's the number we're talking about, I think it would probably be realistic to say 2 or 3 actually got to hearing. Most of these settle. There's nothing like a pressure point, like an arbitration hearing deadline, to bring the parties together and really focus on establishing what that midpoint, that realistic player value is, where that number's pegged.
All right, we'll keep tabs on all these situations as the offseason unfolds.